No.
Frankenstein has died and come back to life more times than almost any character in cinema. But every resurrection tells us a little more about the monster that really matters. The one holding the scalpel, us.
It's alive! It's alive!
For more than 2 centuries, Mary Shelley's story has been pulled apart and stitched back together. From black and white laboratories to gothic castles to steampunk action movies, and now to Guillermo del Toro's 2025 Netflix version, a film that quietly rewires what we think Frankenstein is even about. Some people still picture a dumb brute with bolts in his neck. Others remember a tragic poet trapped in a borrowed body. And now there is a creature who forgives his father and pushes a ship back toward the light. In this video, we are going to trace that evolution. How cinema, not the book, created the classic Frankenstein image. How monster crossovers helped invent the idea of a shared universe long before Marvel. What the original novel actually says about responsibility and creation. And finally, why Frankenstein 2025 feels so different from every other version, and how it uses the same body parts, the same myth, to build something much more human. By the end, you should feel the weight of 2 questions. Who is the real monster in this story? And what do we owe the things and the people that we create?
Forgive me, my son.
We usually think of Frankenstein as a simple horror myth, a mad scientist, a storm, and a hulking corpse that suddenly sits up. In reality, Mary Shelley wrote something far more complicated. Her 1818 novel is a story about responsibility, abandonment, and a creature who starts life as a blank page and slowly fills it with pain. The monster in the book is intelligent, articulate, and painfully self-aware. He teaches himself language, reads philosophy, watches a family from the shadows, and begs for a companion, not because he wants to conquer the world, but because he cannot stand being alone. When he finally turns violent, it is not because he is born evil, it is because he is rejected again and again, first by his creator, then by everyone else. Crucially, Shelley barely describes the creation method. There is no dramatic list of ingredients, no instruction manual, only hints of secret experiments. Electricity and lightning, the things movies obsess over, are not on the page at all. Shelley keeps the process vague on purpose so no one can repeat it, and because she cares more about what happens after the spark than about the spark itself. Her message is not simply, do not play God. It is, if you dare to create something, you are responsible for it. The tragedy is not that Victor made a creature. It is that, the moment the experiment succeeds, he looks at it, panics, and runs away. But cinema loved a different story. In 1931, Universal Pictures needed a monster to follow the success of Dracula. They did not want another thin, elegant predator. They wanted something heavy, brutal, instantly iconic. So when they adapted Frankenstein, they took the broad outline of Shelley's plot and built almost everything else from scratch. The scientist is renamed Henry instead of Victor. A hunchback assistant appears out of nowhere, not from the novel, but from stage plays and screenwriters who thought that, if the doctor is mad, his assistant should look like an outcast too. The brain they steal comes from a jar labeled criminal, because early 20th century science was perfectly happy to blame a person's morality on the shape of their frontal lobe. Then comes the moment that burned itself into pop culture. Lightning, machinery, the table rising, and that line, "It is alive," repeated so many times that even people who have never seen the film can quote it.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
The monster that sits up on that table is nothing like Shelley's description. The novel's creature is gaunt and yellow-skinned, almost too thin to look human. That would vanish on black and white film. So Universal invented the square head, the neck bolts, the huge boots, and padded shoulders. Boris Karloff disappeared under more than 20 kilos of costume and makeup, transformed into a walking visual metaphor, a creature that looks strong and simple before it even speaks. What the film keeps from Shelley is the sense that this being is not evil in the beginning. He is frightened of fire, confused by the world, and responds violently to cruelty. There is a heartbreaking moment by a lake where a little girl shows him how flowers float, and in his childlike innocence, he tries the same thing with her, not understanding death until it is too late. The angry village mob, the torches, the burning windmill, all of that becomes another part of the legend. But the deeper novel, the articulate, philosophical creature, The discussion about responsibility is mostly replaced by a simpler image, a dangerous experiment gone wrong. Universal doubled down on that image in the sequel, Bride of Frankenstein. The tiny people in jars, the new mad scientist, the self-destruct lever that blows up the lab, these are the moments where the film slides from gothic tragedy into self-parody. Yet, in the middle of all this absurdity, there is another scene that feels strangely close to Shelley. The blind man, who cannot see the monster's face and therefore treats him as a guest, a friend, a lonely soul. Even here, the core pattern is familiar, a being that is not born evil, a world that refuses to see his humanity, and that violence that grows from rejection. As Universal went on, things became louder and less thoughtful. Son of Frankenstein and the Ghost of Frankenstein turned the hunchback assistant into Igor, a name that would later stick to almost every version of the Doctor's helper, whether it made sense or not.
I have a flatmate. Goes by the name of Igor Straussman. Man's a morphine addict. Idiot. Complete liar. Thankfully for us, he's almost never home. So should anyone question your presence here, you are to say that you are he, yes?
I'm Igor.
Very good.
The monster's brain is swapped around, characters return from the dead because the box office needs them, and slowly a new idea begins to emerge. What if all these monsters lived in the same world? Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula. These are not masterpieces, but they do something important. They throw iconic characters into one story, they make crossovers feel normal, they prime audiences for the idea that you can build an entire universe out of creatures who were never meant to share the same stage. Long before Iron Man met Thor, Frankenstein's monster was fighting the Wolfman in a flooded castle that ran out of budget before it ran out of plot. Later films like Van Helsing picked up this thread again, mixing Dracula, werewolves, and Frankenstein's creation into one gothic action playground. Even in these pulp versions, there are flashes of something closer to the book. The monster in Van Helsing is intelligent and oddly gentle, more victim than villain, which is already closer to Shelley than the lumbering brute of the old posters. Modern attempts kept reanimating the myth in new directions. Frankenstein, turned the creature into a brooding action hero called Adam, fighting demons and gargoyles in a city of stone churches and fire. Victor Frankenstein in 2015 tried something different again, retelling the story from Igor's point of view, starting with an abused circus hunchback who is not even really a hunchback, just a man with a giant abscess that a single dramatic operation conveniently cures.
You are not a hunchback.
It leans into the dynamic between Victor and his assistant, treats science like a chaotic startup, and deliberately remixes details from the Universal films rather than from the novel. The monster, when it finally appears, has the familiar flat head and empty eyes, a conscious nod to the cinematic tradition it is cannibalizing. All of these versions share one thing. They orbit the legend that cinema created, the square-headed monster, the cackling genius, the lightning. Very few of them seriously commit to Shelley's original focus, the tragedy of a creator who walks away from his responsibility and a creature who understands exactly what has been done to him. That brings us to Guillermo del Toro. Frankenstein 2025 arrives with more baggage than almost any remake. The book is over 200 years old. There are more than 60 major film and television adaptations, and many more loose variations. A lot of people feel like they have already seen this story, even if they have only absorbed it through references, cartoons, and Halloween masks. Del Toro knows this, and instead of trying to shock us with a brand new creature, he shifts the camera and the emotion somewhere else. First, he makes the story deeply personal. His Victor, played by Oscar Isaac, is not just a curious student who stumbles into forbidden science. He is a boy raised between a cold, brutal father and a warm, loving mother. When that mother dies and the father fails to save her, something in Victor snaps. He decides that if ordinary doctors fail, he will become something beyond them. He will conquer death itself, literally living up to the meaning of his name.
You let her die, did you not?
I did everything in my power to save her. You must know that.
So you failed?
No one can conquer death.
I will. I will conquer it.
Del Toro leans into duality. The same actress, Mia Goth, plays both the mother and Elizabeth, the woman Victor comes to love later in life. The film constantly rhymes images, ivory and ebony coffins, life and death, tenderness and cruelty. Victor's childhood is full of anatomy lessons delivered as punishment, love withheld as a weapon, knowledge tied to violence. It is not hard to see how this blurred, painful education turns into an obsession with controlling bodies from the inside out. He also changes the world around him. Instead of the late 18th century of the novel, the film moves to the mid-19th century and unfolds against the backdrop of the Crimean War. That choice is not cosmetic. It gives Victor access to endless corpses, men turned into raw material by industrialized conflict, and links his private obsession to a system that already treats human lives as expendable. The arms dealer who funds his research literally makes his fortune from death. When the creature finally arrives, Del Toro refuses to make him a mindless brute. Jacob Elordi gives him a towering body, but a face that is strangely gentle, stitched and scarred but full of confusion. Like Shelley's version, he begins as a blank slate, looking at the world with terror and curiosity. Unlike many earlier films, his story is not limited to a few scenes of destruction. Del Toro splits the film into two halves, the first from Victor's point of view, the second from the creature's, and lets the audience live inside both. We see Victor repeat his father's cruelty, chaining his creation, shouting at him, treating him like a failed experiment instead of a new being. We see Elizabeth do the opposite, recognizing pain in the creature's eyes and calling that pain proof of intelligence, not a reason to fear him. We watch the creature hide near a farmhouse, learn kindness by observing a family, defend a blind man from wolves, only to be driven away by hunters who see only a monster. These episodes echo both the Universal films, especially The Hut of the Blind Man, and Shelley's novel, where the creature secretly helps a poor family with firewood and dreams of one day being accepted by them. The difference is in how the film frames these events. Earlier movies tend to use these moments as isolated set pieces before the story rushes back to torches and laboratories. Del Toro lets them breathe. He wants us to feel the creature's slow awakening to the reality that in this world, people like him are hunted just for existing. He also softens some of the violence. In many accounts of the film, critics point out that the creature's most brutal acts are framed as self-defense rather than cold-blooded murder. That choice is controversial for purists who love the book's darker edge, but it fits Del Toro's aim. He is less interested in punishment than in empathy. He is not making a horror film in the traditional sense. He has said that himself. He is making a romantic, emotional drama that happens to wear Frankenstein's clothes. Where the film diverges most sharply from the novel is in its ending. In Shelley's book, Victor chases the creature, consumed by revenge, and dies without reconciliation. The creature, finding him dead, delivers a final speech full of regret and promises to burn himself, disappearing into the Arctic night like a ghost whose fate we never see. Del Toro instead stages a meeting on a trapped ship in the ice. Victor is broken, the creature is wounded, and in this closed, frozen space, the father finally acknowledges his son. He apologizes. The creature forgives him. Then, in a gesture that belongs entirely to this adaptation, the creature uses his inhuman strength to push the ship free, saving the crew and walking alone toward the horizon, finally able to face the sunlight that once terrified him. It is a small change on paper, but it completely changes the temperature of the story. Shelley ends in despair with a creature who believes he can never undo what he has done. Del Toro ends in something closer to bittersweet hope. Pain remains, loss remains. But the cycle of vengeance that started in a laboratory is finally interrupted by a choice to forgive. So what exactly makes Frankenstein 2025 feel different from all the versions that came before? It is not simply the period detail or the beautiful sets, although those are there. From the practical Victorian interiors to the painterly color contrasts that critics keep highlighting. It is the way the film rearranges the story's priorities. Classic cinema Frankenstein is about a man who dared to trespass into God's territory and paid the price. The lesson is simple. Do not build monsters. Do not meddle with the dead. Shelley's Frankenstein is about something messier. It asks what happens when you bring something into the world and then refuse to care for it. It blames Victor not for his curiosity, but for his cowardice, for dropping his creation the moment it becomes real. Del Toro's Frankenstein sits in between but leans towards Shelley. His Victor is more obviously traumatized, more theatrical, more steeped in generational damage than in the book, and the film spells out themes that Shelley leaves between the lines, which some critics see as a loss of subtlety. Yet the heart of his film beats in the same place as hers, in the relationship between creator and creation, in the question of whether we are doomed to repeat the cruelty we inherit, or whether we can, at the very last moment, decide to do something else. The 1931 film gave the creature a square head and made him an icon. The sequels and crossovers turned him into a piece of a larger monster universe. Many later films turned him into an action figure, a superhero, a joke. Frankenstein 2025 gives him back something he had in the novel but often lost on screen: a voice, a point of view, and the right to end his story not as a punchline or a pile of ashes, but as a person who has suffered, chosen, and finally, quietly, forgiven. If the early films took Shelley's rough sketch and drew a simpler, louder caricature, Del Toro's version feels like someone going back to the original canvas and carefully layering color and texture over it, not to restore it exactly, because that is impossible, but to let us see familiar shapes in a new way. In the end, every Frankenstein adaptation tells us less about the monster and more about the time that made it. Frankenstein 2025 belongs to a moment obsessed with trauma, empathy, and responsibility. It asks why some children turn into monsters and quietly suggests that many of them were never monsters at all, just blank pages that the world wrote on with fire. And maybe that is why this story refuses to stay dead. Every generation looks at Victor and his creation and sees a new reflection, another warning, another hope. The real question is not whether Frankenstein's monster is alive. It is whether we are finally ready to stop running from the things we have made and learn to face them with open eyes and, if we are lucky, with a human heart. Thank you for watching.